Nick Ferrari at breakfast. Call 0345 6060 973.
10 to 8 is the time. Back to your conversations, reviews of Tony Blair and, of course, what we see with playing out at Kabul in Afghanistan. But it's the very latest from Conservative MP and Armed Forces Minister James Heappey, of course, joined us last week, and I'm pleased to say he can make a return today. As you understand it, and I appreciate, Minister, it's a desperately fluid situation, but we seem to have conflicting stories here. We might have, as if the British Army, the brave men and women who are over there, might have until the end of this month. They might only have 2 days. As you understand it this morning, Minister, what do you believe to be the situation? Good morning.
Morning, Nick. So first of all, if I may, just the sort of daily ops update for your listeners. 1,821 people evacuated from Kabul over the last 24 hours across 8 flights operated by the Royal Air Force.
That's Brits and Afghan nationals, is it, Minister? Just to clarify.
Brits and Afghan nationals, yes.
OK.
The flow remains good into the evacuation handling centre at the Barron Hotel, and there are 9 flights scheduled for the next 24 hours. The situation on the ground remains challenging, though. There is a real security threat that we're facing, particularly from Islamic State. And so for that purpose, I'm afraid what we can't do is really give you the exact dates of when each part of the mission culminates. Clearly, at some point, the envelope that we're working within is set by the 31st of August. That's what we're still working to within this building, notwithstanding that there are conversations to follow at the G7 that might change that. At some point, therefore, before the 31st, we will need to stop evacuating people at the pace that we are at the moment and switch to the military withdrawal. We don't want to advertise the date of the last evacuation flight because we don't want to cause more of the sort of desperate scenes that you saw on Saturday, where there was a crush outside the gates that killed 7 people. And we can't advertise the date of the last flights for the military because, as you'll appreciate, the number of people guarding our mission reduces throughout the withdrawal. And obviously the risk to them, therefore, grows the further into the military withdrawal that we get. And I hope that your listeners will understand, therefore, why talking with exact dates just isn't possible.
What is the level of control outside of Kabul airport in the precinct there, as you understand it, Minister? Is that as controlled as it can be given the circumstances?
Well, I mean, things are imperfect. This is Kabul in quite a chaotic time. But yes, the Taliban pushed their outer cordon further away from the Barron Hotel on Saturday evening. I think they were as alarmed by the images that we were all seeing on Saturday as anybody. That's given the whole process more depth, which naturally alleviates the crush. But more importantly, what they're doing is they are marshalling people at that outer cordon into 2 separate queues, one for the American process and one for the British process. And a number of other nations have now come and bolted into our plan. That meant that the pictures you were seeing from Kabul yesterday were somewhat better, and the flow through the EHCs reflects that.
Of course, there is a suggestion, again in the news media, that the Prime Minister will contact the President at some point within the next 24 hours or so and ask for extension of time. Given, and I realise the insanity of asking you to hold you to deadlines because of the danger it poses to British personnel and everyone at the airport, how would you react if President Biden said, yes, let's give another week, another 48 hours or whatever, Minister?
We've made no secret of the fact that if an extension were possible, we'd be grateful. I mean, there's just a reality that the military withdrawal will take a certain period of time. So any extension to the mission is more days being able to fly out 1,500 people plus, and the Royal Air Force are there now in sufficient volume that we can maintain that sort of flow for an extended period if that opportunity is given to us. Now, the Foreign Secretary has had that conversation with Secretary Blinken. Yesterday lunchtime, the Secretary of State for Defence had that conversation with Secretary Austin. Tomorrow it will be discussed by the G7. But Nick, even though they are the 7 most powerful people on the planet, they don't get to take that decision in isolation. The Taliban get a vote as well. And that's why we're continuing to work towards the 31st, because even if the political will in London, Washington, Paris, Berlin is to extend, the Taliban may say no. And whilst, of course, we have the military force that would be required to stay by force if we wanted to, I think you can probably imagine that the sort of humanitarian mission we're embarked in is not helped by the international community fighting the Taliban on the streets of Kabul again. And therefore, I'm not sure that it's something we should really be considering.
You don't think
staying by force?
Your sense is the Taliban might not look favourably for a 48-hour deadline, Minister.
Well, they might not, and that's why we're taking nothing for granted. We are making sure that every single minute counts. You know, the flight that is or has probably just landed in Dubai, a C-17 left with 432 people on it. I mean, that is an extraordinary number of people to have packed onto one of those planes. I remember flying back from Kabul on one of them myself at the end of one of my tours, and I felt it was pretty cramped with 200 of us on there. And but the Royal Air Force are busting a gut to get every last person out they can with every flight that we have, because we don't want to take anything for granted around the political conversations that will happen within the G7 and then the diplomatic conversations that happen with the Taliban thereafter.
The figure of 6,000 is on the front page of one of the newspapers this morning, Minister. Mass airlift to evacuate. Is that the sort of number you and your colleagues are trying to get out?
Well, you know, we're getting out 1,800 a day yesterday, or over the previous 48 hours, 1,000 a day over the 48 hours after that. So 1,500 to 2,000 a day. We'll get out as many as we can. And if, you know, the Secretary of State has given the Chief of the Air Staff all the permission he needs to waive all of the safety cases around the number of people that can be on these planes. We will get out as many as we physically can. The numbers that we are focused on, Nick, is that there's up to 1,800 UK eligible people. So that's sort of, you know, passport holders, people that we've got a sort of consular responsibility to. And then there's about 2,275 remaining under the Afghan Resettlement and Assistance Programme, the ARAP. They were the people that were part of Op Pitting to begin with. A number of people have come forward in the last week who are eligible for ARAP, so of course we've included them. But what we've also been doing in the meantime is adding in thousands of people from Afghan civil society, because we'd like to get them out if we can. But as you've heard me say, you've heard Ben Wallace say, the hard reality is we won't get everybody out, but we're doing our damnedest to get as big a number out as we possibly can.
Last couple of questions, Minister. How helpful was it that the former British Prime Minister Tony Blair described the US policy as imbecilic?
Well, look, I mean, he can say what he wants.
How helpful was it?
There's no secret that the UK and US had some disagreements over the way that the Afghan withdrawal should happen. But that should not in any way mask that what's happening on the ground in Kabul right now is a UK-US operation that is as close as any that we've ever done. And all around the world, from sort of Royal Navy ships working as part of the US relief of the Haiti earthquake, all the way through to the carrier strike group in the Philippine Sea, which has got US Marine Corps fighter jets embarked and a US Navy destroyer under command of the Royal Navy. Around the world, the US and the UK remain the very best of friends. I'm not going to use language like that about the US government, because I think that, you know, the only people who enjoy hearing language like that being used are the Chinese and the Russians, who remain our competitors. The US is our closest and strongest of allies.
Lastly, a Sharia council scholar appeared on the BBC yesterday, and she said, every single person I know as a Muslim is celebrating the return of the Taliban. How do you respond to that? Not least as there are very brave young men and women serving in Afghanistan, trying to get a lot of people who seem to think otherwise. Minister.
Well, I just don't see how that can be the case. I think around the Islamic world, there is concern about what the Taliban may prove to be. Within Afghanistan, there is very obvious concern and desperation around what the Taliban may prove to be. Now, as I said to you on Friday, Nick, there is this chance that the Taliban, having been out of power for 20 years, have realized that the international community has it in their gift to kick them out again if we want to, and that therefore they might not want to be the international pariah this time that they were last. And that might mean that they're going to do things differently. I saw some footage on TV yesterday of a female employee, I think at the Kabul mayor's office, being interviewed, and she had turned up for work and the Taliban had said that they'd like her to wear the hijab, but not necessarily the burqa. I have no idea whether that reflects just them on a PR campaign in the period that we're in right now, or whether that reflects a genuine change in attitude. That's why nobody's rushing to recognize them beyond the essential relations we must have to deliver the mission as it is right now. What then must happen is a period of time where we judge the Taliban by their actions and decide whether or not they're going to be someone we work with.
As ever, grateful for your time. Thank you very much indeed. Armed Forces Minister James Heappey appearing here on LBC, or at 8 o'clock news is next.
On your radio, on Global Player, and
Play LBC.
leading Britain's conversation. This is LBC.
From Global's newsroom at 8 o'clock, the Taliban has warned there will be consequences if Western troops